Carlos and Isabella, along with their 5-year-old son Mateo, headed to the fair in the city park. The little boy was eager to ride the attractions, indulge in ice cream and cotton candy, and looked forward to the outing with unrestrained glee. The day was pleasant, not overly hot, and the fair attracted a multitude of people. There were children with their parents, groups of teenagers, and even elderly couples, each finding something to enjoy. The youngest ones rode ponies and toy cars. Teenagers tested their skills at the shooting range. Grandparents listened to street musicians and danced in pairs. Everything was idyllic, but at one point Carlos and Isabella lost sight of Mateo, who was chasing pigeons around the central fountain. "Where's the little one?" exclaimed Isabella, her voice sharp with worry. "He was just here," her husband replied, his brow furrowed with concern, looking around bewildered. The young couple frantically began searching for their son. They asked passers-by if they had seen a curly-haired boy in a red shirt and green shorts, but people just shook their heads in response. How could anyone remember a specific face in such a crowd? Carlos and Isabella were seriously frightened. Where could he have gone? What if he's been kidnapped? Isabella fretted, her voice trembling. Carlos did his best to reassure his wife. "Don't worry, darling, we'll find him," he said encouragingly, though he himself was very scared. He feared their son might have run out of the park and into traffic. "Maybe we should split up," Carlos suggested. "I'll go to the exit and check the streets. Maybe Mateo remembered where we parked the car and went there. You go to the green bridge and look for him there." Isabella nodded, barely holding back tears. "Be careful," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Her husband waved to her and hurried towards the main gates. Meanwhile, Isabella ran towards the green bridge, a local landmark that attracted strollers every day. The bridge was named for the ivy that hung on both sides, forming an emerald green wall. Underneath flowed a small, murmuring stream, a pleasant spot to sit on summer evenings. Breathless, Isabella approached the bridge, calling Mateo's name as she went. Suddenly, to her immense relief, she heard children's laughter. The young woman darted toward the sound and realized it was coming from under the bridge. She pushed aside the curtain of ivy and entered the semi-darkness. Her eyes took a moment to adjust, so Isabella couldn't see anything clearly at first, but she understood that there were 2 children playing under the bridge. Apparently, they were running back and forth, taking turns chasing each other. "Mateo?" Isabella asked hopefully. "Mama." She heard her son's familiar voice and couldn't hold back her tears. A moment later, her son was hugging her tightly. "You scared me so much, sweetheart," Isabella said, her voice choked with emotion. "You can't run away from Mommy and Daddy." Mateo looked up and met her eyes, his own wide with remorse. "Sorry, Mommy. I was playing here with my new friend, Ava." Isabella now noticed a little girl, about 4 years old, standing shyly beside Mateo. She had curly chestnut hair and a face smudged with dirt. "Where are your mom and dad?" Isabella asked Ava gently. Ava shook her head. "I don't have a daddy," the girl replied seriously. "But my mommy is somewhere nearby, playing the flute. It's to make money for us." As the girl fell silent, Isabella could indeed hear the faint, melodic sounds of a flute drifting from somewhere nearby. "And my grandpa went crazy with grief," Ava continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "He stopped talking. Now he's silent all the time, like a fish. Poor thing," Isabella thought, her heart itching for the child. "I'll take you to your mommy," the young woman said. "It's time for Mateo and me to go home." "No, Mommy, I want to play a little more with Ava," Mateo protested, his face pleading. "It's too late," Isabella replied. "You're tired." "But I can sleep here," her son objected. "Here?" Under the bridge, Isabella was surprised. She couldn't understand where her son got such an idea. "Yes," her son replied eagerly. "Ava and her family do it." With these words, the boy pointed to some crumpled blankets and pillows lying on a bed of dry grass. Isabella was taken aback. So the girl her son had befriended was homeless. Her first thought was to get Mateo away from here as quickly as possible. But Ava looked at her so trustingly, and she was so small and vulnerable, that Isabella wanted to know more about her and her family. She took Mateo and Ava by the hand and led them out from under the bridge. "I'll call Mateo's dad now, and then you'll take us to your mom," the young woman said to the girl, taking out her phone from her bag. "I found Mateo. He's safe," Isabella said when Carlos picked up the phone. He sighed with relief. "Thank God," he exclaimed. "I'm coming to you." Then he added anxiously, "He wasn't scared, was he?" "No, everything's fine," Isabella replied. He was playing with a new friend. We're waiting for you at the bridge." With these words, she hung up. "Now let's go to your mom," Isabella said to the girl. Ava nodded eagerly and ran across the bridge toward the sounds of the flute. Isabella and Mateo could barely keep up with her. On the other side of the stream, there was a small, makeshift stage where street musicians often performed, and in front of it, under the shade of willows, there was a row of benches for resting. In the center of the stage, on a low stool, sat a beautiful young woman with her curly chestnut hair cascading to her shoulders. Her eyes were closed, and her slender fingers moved deftly over the flute, drawing out a melody that was both haunting and beautiful. She wore a simple, wrinkled linen dress. "Mama, Mama!" shouted Ava, climbing the wooden steps onto the stage. "I brought my new friends." Startled, the young woman abruptly opened her eyes and stopped playing. "Ava," she said sternly, looking at her daughter, "I asked you not to shout so loudly. You scared me." Then the young woman's face took on a worried expression. "You're all dirty again. You've been playing in the dirt. We need to go to the river and wash you properly." "Sorry, Mommy," replied the girl as the young woman adjusted her dress. "I'll wash up, but please let me introduce you to my new friends first. I'm so happy to have met them." Isabella was surprised by the eloquence of the girl's speech. She seems to come from an educated family, she thought. Meanwhile, concern flashed across Ava's mother's face, but when she glanced at Isabella and Mateo, she visibly relaxed. Her forehead smoothed, and a faint smile appeared on her face. "My name is Alina," she introduced herself. "I'm a musician." After a moment's pause, she added, "Though right now, I'm not looking my best. Our family is going through tough times." With that, the young woman sighed heavily. "I'm Isabella," Mateo's mother, Isabella, introduced herself. "Nice to meet you." She was increasingly convinced that she was dealing with very educated people. "Ava already mentioned that your grandfather went mad," Mateo chimed in. "Is that why you're having a rough time?" Isabella gave her son a stern look, but softened a moment later. "He's still such a little child. He doesn't understand tact," she thought. "Excuse Mateo." The young woman apologized to Alina. "Oh, it's nothing," Alina said gently, and turning to the boy said, "I appreciate your concern, Mateo." He smiled proudly. "No, it's not just that," Alina admitted, her voice low. "Our house burned down a week ago, and we're living on the streets." As she said this, Alina couldn't hold back her tears. Little Ava began to comfort her mother affectionately, stroking her hand. "Oh, what a pity," Isabella exclaimed sincerely. "So your house wasn't insured?" "That's the thing. It wasn't," Alina confessed. "We had just moved there from another city, where I grew up. My mother passed away, and my father took it very hard. It's been a year now, and he can't let go and get over the loss. So I thought moving might help him recover, but it only got worse." Alina sniffled, and at that moment, Carlos approached them. "Here I am." He smiled at his wife, oblivious to Alina and her daughter. "Are we ready to go?" "Just a moment, dear," Isabella said. "Let me introduce you to Alina and her daughter, Ava. They've had a tragedy. Their house burned down, it wasn't insured, and now they're living on the streets." Carlos cast a sympathetic glance at the young woman. "I'm very sorry," he said. Meanwhile, Isabella fell into deep thought. "My love," she said after a few moments, "can I have a word with you?" Carlos nodded, and they stepped aside while Ava and Mateo resumed their game of tag. "Listen, Carlos," Isabella began. "From what I gather, Alina and her father are very educated people. She's a musician and earns a living through music. They've been very unlucky. After the fire, they're spending nights under a bridge." "How awful!" Carlos shook his head sadly. "And the worst part is that could happen to anyone," Isabella said, her voice filled with compassion. "Yes," Carlos nodded in agreement. "I can see they're really decent people," Isabella continued. "What if we help them?" Carlos looked surprised. "But how?" "We could offer them our country cottage," Isabella said, her eyes shining. "Just for a while." Carlos pondered his wife's words. "Are you sure they're trustworthy?" Isabella nodded. "Yes, I can see that they've really had a tough time." "All right," Carlos agreed. "I'll trust your intuition." The young couple returned to Alina. "Alina," Isabella said as the young woman stopped playing the flute again, "we have a proposition for you." With these words, she glanced at her husband. "You could stay at our country cottage until you sort out your housing situation," Carlos said. Alina couldn't believe what she heard. Tears welled up in the young woman's eyes again. "Are you really going to do this for us?" she exclaimed in surprise. Isabella and Carlos nodded. "Of course, Alina," Anyone could find themselves in your situation, so we're happy to help. It's no trouble for us. Alina sincerely thanked Isabella and Carlos. You're real angels, she said emotionally. They agreed that Carlos would drop Isabella and Mateo off at home, then return to the park for Alina, her father, and Ava to take them to the country cottage. The family had very few belongings, just documents, Ava's favorite doll, and Alina's flute, along with the blankets and pillows given by compassionate people. The young woman did not take her flute. She didn't want to impose on Carlos's kindness any more than she already had. Carlos drove the family to the cottage and showed them the rooms and the small garden, which delighted Ava. The girl couldn't believe her happiness. Now we have a home again, she rejoiced, her laughter echoing in the small house. Carlos left the family to settle in and went to the supermarket to buy groceries for them, his heart warmed by their sincere gratitude. For the first time in days he felt a sense of duty fulfilled as he returned home. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Carlos was a businessman, and soon he had a business trip to another city. He decided to take his son and his wife, who wasn't working, with him. I'll need to be there for 3 months, so it's better for you to come with me to keep from being alone at home, he said. Isabella gladly agreed. She loved to travel, and she liked a change of scenery. Besides, in the city where her husband was going, her old friend, who she hadn't seen in a long time, lived. Things fell into place nicely, and Carlos managed to find a good apartment downtown, which he rented for 3 months. Isabella looked forward to the trip. Before leaving, she called Alina and asked how she and her family were doing. The young woman replied that everything was fine and thanked Isabella again for the opportunity to stay at the cottage. I go into the city every day to play. For now, we have enough money, but I understand we can't use your hospitality forever, so I'm diligently looking for a good job. Don't rush, Alina, Isabella replied warmly. You can stay with us until you find the perfect solution. Alina sincerely thanked the young woman once again. I'm doing everything I can, she said, and after a pause, added with a smile, Ava keeps talking about Mateo all the time. She wants to invite him over. Isabella told the young woman that she, Carlos, and their son were leaving for 3 months, but would definitely visit them when they returned. That was the end of their conversation. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Carlos, Isabella, and Mateo had a wonderful time in the other city. Mother and son walked a lot during the day, and in the evenings, when Carlos came home from work, they played board games and went to cafes for dinner. Isabella felt like she was on a second honeymoon, albeit this time with her little son by her side. Time flew by very quickly, and soon the day came when they had to return to their hometown. The family left early in the morning and arrived home by evening. Mateo was overjoyed to see his favorite red, car-shaped bed. "Mama, I'm so happy we're home," the little one exclaimed, throwing his arms around her. "I missed it so much." "Me too," replied Isabella, hugging him back. "It's nice to visit, but there's no place like home." Mateo hugged his beloved teddy bear and suddenly remembered something. "When are we going to visit Ava?" Isabella pondered for a moment. "Maybe tomorrow? Let's do it," agreed Mateo. "Will Daddy drive us in the car?" Isabella kissed him on the forehead. "I think so. Let me ask him." Carlos wasn't opposed, especially since he didn't have work the next day. Isabella called Alina and warned her that they would be visiting. The young woman froze for a moment, as if hesitant, but then said, "Yes, of course. We'll be waiting for you." Isabella decided she must have imagined the hesitation. The next day, the family woke up, had an omelette and toast with cocoa for breakfast, and set off for the cottage. Mateo couldn't wait to see Ava. When they pulled up to the house, the girl came out onto the porch and, seeing the familiar car, ran up to the gate. "It's you. You finally came," she exclaimed joyfully. Then, lowering her voice, she confided, "And Grandpa has arranged such a surprise." Isabella's heart sank. Had the old man caused trouble in the house? Was that why Alina didn't seem happy to hear they were coming to visit? Isabella bit her lip, preparing for the worst, but when she and Carlos entered the house, they couldn't believe their eyes. The walls of the living room, which had been empty before, were now adorned with paintings. Isabella even felt for a moment that she had stepped into an art gallery. "I'll explain everything to you now," Alina said hurriedly as she greeted them. It was clear she was very nervous. Carlos and Isabella stared at the young woman, waiting. They had no idea where all these canvases had come from. It had only been 3 months, and in that time, Alina had become a collector of paintings. But where did she get the money? Wasn't she looking for a job to move into her own place? Isabella's head was spinning. All these paintings were done by my father, Elena finally confessed. Isabella and Carlos exchanged astonished looks. So, he's an artist, Carlos clarified. Elena shook her head in response. No, he never was. I've never seen him pick up a brush in my life. Until recently, Elena said. Then I don't understand. Carlos shrugged. It's because of my mother, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. As I mentioned before, she passed away just over a year ago, and my father couldn't find peace. He didn't talk to anyone. Then, a week after we moved here, he suddenly asked me to buy him canvas and paints. It seemed strange to me, but I couldn't refuse him. He had been silent for so long. That day, I lingered in the square where I played the flute to earn more money. I had enough for a small canvas, brushes, and the cheapest set of paints. At home, my father thanked me for getting everything he needed. He set himself up in the garden, creating a workspace, and to my surprise, I saw him start to paint. I didn't want to disturb him. He sat in the garden for over 4 hours, hardly moving and not looking up from his work. I quietly left the house and approached him unheard. Looking over his shoulder, I saw that he had painted a poppy field and a girl in a red dress, so beautifully that I couldn't believe my eyes. When the painting was finished, my father silently stood up and went inside without looking at me. He locked himself in his room, and I thought I heard him crying. I carefully took my father's painting and hung it on the wall. The next day, my father asked me to buy him another canvas, which I did. The same thing happened again. Dad painted for a very long time and then silently went back to his room. I hung the painting on the wall again, just like the first time. This repeated many times. As you probably guessed, this is amazing, Isabella said, examining the paintings. It seems your father has a real gift that apparently lay dormant in him all his life. Elena nodded, barely holding back tears. It's a pity Mom never saw this, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Isabella agreed with her. Yes, she would have loved it. Meanwhile, Carlos was silently thoughtful, as if considering something in his mind. Maybe we should sit in the garden, Elena suggested. I'll bring some drinks. With pleasure, Isabella replied. They left the house and, descending from the porch, walked along the path to a white gazebo shaded by a large oak tree. There was a small table and 2 garden benches. Carlos and Isabella sat down on one of them. What are you thinking about? The young woman asked. I have an idea, Carlos replied seriously. Isabella didn't interfere. Elena brought a tray with cool lemonade and fresh fruits. Help yourselves, she offered warmly, placing the tray on the table and sitting across from the young couple. Isabella gladly took a sip, only now realizing how thirsty she was. How's the job search going? She cautiously asked, not wanting Elena to think she was trying to drive her away from the summer cottage. Elena sighed. Not well, so far, she sadly replied. It was clear this question troubled the young woman, and Isabella regretted asking it. She reached out and took Elena's hand. You'll find a job for sure. Everything happens in its own time, Isabella encouraged. I hope so, Elena smiled weakly. I need a job to find my own place. At that moment, Carlos chimed in. I have an alternative idea, he said weedily. Both women looked at him with surprise. Your father's paintings, Carlos began. You've seen them yourself. I'm sure they could interest wealthy investors and patrons. Why not try to contact someone in that circle? Isabella smiled. Well, Carlos, so that's what you've been thinking about. What a clever idea. It never even crossed my mind. A whole mix of feelings crossed Elena's face. Excitement, hope, joy, and doubt. It's a wonderful thought, but I don't know anyone in this city. I have no connections, Elena said, her voice laced with uncertainty. Isabella turned to Carlos. And what about you, darling? She asked. He smiled mysteriously. I think I might know someone. With these words, he took a big sip of lemonade. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. A week passed. One evening, Carlos came home with sparkling eyes. I think I found a suitable patron, he said, a triumphant note in his voice. His name is Sebastian Reyes. He wants to see Elena's father's paintings. Isabella was so overjoyed that she hugged Carlos. Great news, she exclaimed. When can he visit Elena? We agreed on the end of the week. Friday, probably after lunch, he replied. Then I'll call Elena now and confirm if she'll be home at that time, said Isabella. Ava's mother answered that she would eagerly await the guests on Friday. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Mateo and his mother went to visit Elena and her family in Isabella's car. Carlos was delayed and couldn't catch up with them. We'll meet at Elena's. I'll bring Sebastian Reyes, her husband said. Isabella rarely drove, so she was a bit nervous on the road, but fortunately, everything went more than smoothly, and she neatly parked at the country house. Ava ran onto the porch and rushed to Mateo with wild cries of joy. "You finally came. I've been waiting so long," she exclaimed. "Mom and I baked a chocolate cake." Mateo jumped out of the car and ran to his girlfriend. Isabella turned off the engine and calmly headed for the house. Alina was still busy in the kitchen, decorating the cake with cream roses. Isabella wanted to help, but the young woman just shook her head. "Just a little left," she said. "Then I'll wait in the living room," Isabella said. "I'll finish and bring drinks shortly," Alina promised. "Don't rush," replied Isabella. From the living room, her attention was once again drawn to Alina's father's paintings. She started walking along the walls, carefully examining them, stopping in front of the very first canvas depicting a poppy field and a girl. Isabella took a deep breath. For a moment, she felt like she could sense the summer day captured on the canvas by the gifted artist. "I remember this field as if it were today." Isabella suddenly heard a hoarse, elderly voice. Startled, she turned around and saw Alina's father standing before her. She couldn't believe he was speaking to her. It was a hot May day. The old man continued, his voice raspy but clear. "Sophia and I were riding bikes and stopped at this poppy field. It was our first date." "Sophia, that's Alina's mom," Isabella cautiously clarified. The old man nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "Tell me," the young woman dared to ask, sitting down on the edge of the couch, "how did you two meet?" The old man weakly smiled at her and sat down on the other side. He paused for a moment, his eyes clouded with a mist of memories. Then Ava's grandfather sighed and began his story. "I first saw Sophia when I came to study in the college town in the south of the country. She was sitting on a bench in the park, under a peach tree, reading some book. She wore a white dress with pink flowers, and the wind gracefully played with the ruffles. I couldn't take my eyes off this girl. She was slender and tall, and her long, reddish chestnut hair constantly fell onto her face. She impatiently brushed it away and turned page after page, oblivious to the world around her. Books were always her passion. I wanted to sit on the bench next to her, but suddenly a tall guy approached her. Sophia flinched when he called her by name, but then immediately smiled at him. He sat down next to her and handed her a sandwich in a paper bag. They had lunch together and laughed while I stood aside and burned with jealousy. I desperately wanted to be in that tall guy's place. After watching them for about 5 minutes, I groaned with frustration and left the park in a very bad mood. I thought I would soon forget the girl in the white dress, but she started haunting my dreams at night. During the day, I desperately wanted to see her again, and one day my dream came true. My friend invited me to go to the movies for a comedy session. I agreed because I had nothing better to do. Of course, I would have preferred to go to the movies with the girl, not with my friend, but I had no choice. We arrived there just before 8 o'clock and stood in line at the box office. Out of boredom, I was examining the posters on the walls when suddenly I heard a very infectious and vaguely familiar laughter. I looked in the direction from where it was coming and saw that very same girl from the park. Today, she was wearing a blue dress with small polka dots, the top of which hugged her slender waist, and the skirt flared out to her delicate ankles. The girl's legs were adorned with white sandals. She had tied her hair up in a high ponytail and put on long silver earrings. She looked so charming that I stood there with my mouth open. However, just a moment later, I was again filled with frustration. Next to the girl was the same tall guy. He was animatedly telling her something, and she was laughing at his jokes. I felt a pang of jealousy again. Why was he next to her, and not me? Sensing my gaze, the girl suddenly looked straight into my eyes. I distinctly felt myself blushing. She slightly squinted and bit her lower lip. It was so exciting that for a moment I lost touch with reality. Then Sophia quickly looked away and didn't look in my direction again. My friend noticed that I seemed to be absent and followed my gaze. "Are you infatuated with this girl?" he asked mockingly. "Do you know her?" I asked hopefully. Instead of answering, my friend nodded. "She's studying at the philological faculty. There are the most beautiful girls there." "Yes, she's beautiful," I sighed, "but that tall guy is always around her. I can't even approach her." My friend looked again at Sophia and her companion. "She looks at him like that." He whistled. "It seems you don't stand a chance, old man." His words made me bitter, and I firmly resolved to forget the girl in the blue dress, but I didn't keep my word. The next time I saw her in the library, she was wearing a soft yellow blouse and a pink skirt, her hair freely cascading down her shoulders. The girl wore glasses and looked very smart and serious. She was alone. Of course, I knew she had a boyfriend, but something pushed me toward her. I decided it was my chance, which couldn't be missed, and approached her closer, grabbing the first book I came across on the way. "Can I sit at your table?" I asked, my voice trembling. My knees were shaking and my heart was pounding like crazy. Sophia looked up and gazed at me with surprise. I couldn't tell if she recognized me or not. She glanced around as if to suggest that almost all the tables in the hall were free, and then gave me a mischievous smile. "Of course, sit down," nodded Sophia, rearranging a few books to make it more comfortable for me. I sat down and pretended to be engrossed in reading. However, the book I picked up happened to be an advanced mathematics handbook, something I never understood. Sneaking a glance over Sophia's shoulder, I noticed she was reading Plato. "Do you like philosophy?" I ventured to ask, my voice feeling foreign to my own ears. She looked up at me. I feared she might scold me for interrupting. Instead, she smiled. "He has interesting thoughts," she replied, and immersed herself in reading again. I returned to the incomprehensible formulas and pondered my next question, but it wasn't necessary. "I'm hungry," Sophia suddenly said. "Would you like to go to the cafeteria and grab a snack?" I stared at her in astonishment. Was she inviting me? "I just hate eating alone," Sophia confessed, shrugging her delicate shoulders. I had no choice but to agree. As we walked towards the stairs, I was secretly overjoyed. Yet I couldn't help but worry that her boyfriend might suddenly appear during lunch, which dampened my enthusiasm. We descended to the cafeteria, nearly empty at that hour. Sophia chose a table by the window and sat down. I took the seat opposite her. "What would you like?" I asked, handing her the menu. "I love the croissant with cream cheese and blueberries here. How about you?" Confessing that I rarely visited cafes, I shrugged. "I think I'll try your favorite croissant. I'll have a cappuccino," Sophia added with a nod. I placed our order and was told it would be ready in 5 minutes. Returning to the table, I cautiously looked at Sophia. "So you study advanced mathematics?" she asked, squinting slightly. She sees right through me, I thought. "Actually, no," I confessed. "Sometimes I just need a distraction. I'm an historian." "Oh, I didn't expect that," Sophia said, surprised. "So you're also a humanities person. We have a lot in common." "We do," I blurted out, blushing deeply. Fortunately, the waiter arrived with our order, and we eagerly dug in. I was hungrier than I realized, and the croissant was indeed delicious. Suddenly, I felt very comfortable with Sophia, like I could just be myself. It was different from my experiences with other girls. I relaxed, and our conversation flowed easily and naturally. To be honest, I forgot about everything else in the world. So when her tall friend suddenly appeared at our table, I froze. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you," he said to Sophia without paying any attention to me. I expected her to blush or become flustered that her friend caught her with someone else, but she just smiled cheerfully. "Oh, Diego, sorry. I didn't warn you. Were you waiting for me upstairs?" "Yes, in the philosophy literature section." Diego nodded and pulled the chair to sit at our table. I was very surprised because I didn't notice any jealousy in him. He didn't cast sideways glances at me or appear nervous. Sophia also acted completely at ease. "Oh, I didn't introduce you too," she suddenly realized, looking at me with embarrassment. "This is—" She glanced at me shyly. "I'm sorry, but I didn't ask your name." With that, she giggled. Diego joined in. "Oh, Sophia, you're always in your own world, sitting in a cafe with a young man and not even knowing his name." Sophia. That was the first time I heard that divine name, and it imprinted itself on my heart forever. "My name is Javier," I said, "just like Hemingway." Sophia smiled approvingly. "Easy to remember." She took a sip of her cappuccino and said, "And this is Diego, my brother." I couldn't believe it at first. The tall guy I'd been so jealous of turned out to be Sophia's brother. How foolish I had been. I should have asked right away. I felt so uplifted that I wanted to skip, sing, and dance, but naturally, I restrained myself. "Very nice to meet you, Diego. Like Picasso." I echoed Sophia's joke, and the three of us laughed. Later, I took Sophia's phone number and, when home wouldn't be accurate, I flew through the streets of the town as if carried by wings. The next day, I called Sophia and invited her for a walk. It was a day off, and the streets were filled with elegantly dressed people. Sophia looked wonderful in a red sundress and a white blouse with lantern sleeves. She tied her hair with a red ribbon and wore small, golden flower-shaped earrings. We walked for a long time in the main park in the city center. When we stopped for a snack at the cafe, Sophia suddenly spotted a bike rental nearby. We quickly finished the sandwiches I had ordered, drank some juice, and ran over there. I love bike rides, Sophia said, holding my hand tightly. Her touch felt comforting, and I was ready to do anything for her. If she had suggested flying to the moon at that moment, I would have agreed without hesitation. We rented 2 bikes and started riding. Our town was small, so we didn't notice how we ended up on the outskirts. I suggested we return to the center, but Sophia shook her head. Let's go outside the town, she said. I want to take a walk. Walk in the field. I couldn't argue with her, so we went further. Although I was already very tired, I was never quite athletic. Sophia, on the other hand, looked fresh and energetic. She must have really loved cycling. I was 5. My dad gave me my first tricycle, Sophia said when we stopped to admire the beautiful view. Wow, that's great, I replied, looking at her tenderly. She looked very beautiful at that moment. Her hair was tousled, cheeks flushed. I desperately wanted to kiss her, but I restrained myself. Since then, I can't remember a time when I didn't have a bicycle, Sophia continued, though now I'm so far from everything I used to love. She sighed heavily. I miss my parents and my grandma a lot, she confessed. It's good that Diego is with me. I wanted to hug her, to comfort her, and this time I didn't hold back. Sophia pressed against me, and I felt like I was holding a precious treasure in my arms. We stood like that for a while, then got back on our bikes and continued. Ahead of us stretched a large poppy field. Crimson poppies wonderfully complemented Sophia's red dress. I regretted not bringing a camera with me. Instead, I tried to capture the scene in my memory. We wandered through the poppy field for a long time, hardly speaking to each other, just enjoying the sun's warmth and the fact that we were together. I will always remember that wonderful day, and it remains as vivid in my memories as it was over 50 years ago. With these words, Elena's father sighed again and wiped a tear. Isabella wanted to hug him but hesitated. And the other paintings, are they also reflections of your memories? She asked. The old man nodded. Yes, each canvas holds a piece of my life that I was fortunate to share with Sophia. It's a pity she left us so early. Every moment I spent with her will forever remain in my memory. How beautiful, Isabella murmured. At that moment, Elena entered the living room with a tray in her hands. I made lemonade, she said, and noticing her father, almost dropped the tray. Isabella quickly got up from the couch to help her. I'll put the tray on the table myself, the young woman said, and Elena nodded. Dad, I was just surprised to see you here. You rarely leave your room. Did you talk? Elena looked puzzled. Yes, Senior Javier told me about your mama, Sophia, Isabella said. Really? Elena couldn't stop marveling. Isabella asked how we met, and I wanted to share our story with her, the old man confessed quietly. It was very romantic, Isabella added. I was enchanted. It seems like a whole book could be written about you, old Javier. A grateful glance fell upon the young woman. I would be pleased to read that book and relive all the happiness I experienced with my beloved. With these words, the old man smiled dreamily. Maybe someday Lee will do it, Elena said. She already loves to write stories and even tries to write down her own. How wonderful, Isabella exclaimed. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and Elena hurried to open it. Carlos and a rather attractive young man in a suit entered. He had wavy black hair, tan skin, a mustache, and a neat beard, the type of man that Sebastian belonged to. Really appealed to Elena. The young people entered the house, and the unfamiliar gentleman immediately noticed Javier's paintings. This is amazing, Carlos, he whispered instead of a greeting. Believe me, when you talked about the paintings, I didn't think they would be so wonderful. Isabella's husband nodded happily and hastened to introduce the guest. As you may have guessed, this is Sebastian Reyes, a well-known patron in town. The man politely bowed his head and smiled at everyone present with the most charming smile that unexpectedly made Elena's heart beat faster. And this is Elena, Isabella, and Senior Javier, the author of the paintings you have the honor to contemplate on the walls of our humble home. Carlos jokingly introduced the others. Sebastian smiled again and kissed Elena's hand. She blushed. Everyone sat down on the couch, but Sebastian continued to stand, examining Javier's paintings. I can say one thing. These are stunning works. They convey life, movement, smells, sounds, and love. Isn't it wonderful? I swear, I'm enchanted by these paintings. The old man, Javier, even shed a tear upon hearing these words. I'm very pleased that you appreciate my work so highly, he confessed. Although I'm no artist, it's just a way for me to express my feelings. Sebastian nodded understandingly. And that's exactly how true high art is born, he remarked. I'm ready to buy all your paintings, if you'll allow. All eyes turned to old Javier. He remained silent for a while, then finally spoke up. Of course, these paintings are dear to me as they are memories of Sofia, but I have no right to keep them locked away. Let the world see them. Elena smiled and hugged her father. Your memories have found physical form to become a part of many people's lives, she said, and the old man agreed with her. So it's settled. Sebastian exclaimed joyfully, Let's toast to our meeting. He raised his glass of lemonade, and everyone followed suit. Later, Elena treated the guests and children to chocolate cake and other delicacies. Towards evening, Carlos, Isabella, and Sebastian bid a heartfelt farewell to old Javier and left the house. Carlos headed towards the car, while Isabella searched for Mateo in the garden, who was busy playing with Ava. Elena and Sebastian remained alone. May I have your phone number? The man asked. Elena noticed his slightly trembling hands. Of course, she replied shyly, glancing at him. About Ava's father. What happened to him? Sebastian awkwardly inquired. Elena lowered her head. He passed away when Lee was just a year old, she answered softly. I'm sorry, Sebastian sympathetically murmured, unsure what to say or where to put his hands. Elena looked up and met his gaze. It's okay, she whispered. I've come to terms with the loss. My late husband holds a special place in my heart, but life goes on. Sebastian nodded. Then may I dare to invite you on a date? He stammered. Elena lowered her eyelashes and nodded. Yes, you may, she said. Thus began another beautiful love story. Sebastian and Elena started dating, fell in love, and a year later, the man proposed to the young woman, who happily accepted. She continued to play the flute, but thanks to her husband's connections, she now performed in concerts. Elena and Alejandro, along with Isabella and Carlos, continued their close friendship as families, and their children eagerly anticipated each new meeting. From the story, we learn that Carlos and Isabella's day at the fair ended in a way they never expected. Despite the initial scare of losing Mateo, they not only found their son, but also made new friends in Elena and Ava. Their generous hearts led to offering Elena's family a temporary home, and this act of kindness became a life-changing event for all involved. Elena's father's hidden talent blossomed into beautiful paintings, capturing cherished memories of his late wife, Sofia. These works of art attracted the interest of Sebastian Reyes, a patron who admired their beauty and the deep emotions they conveyed. Alejandro's admiration for the paintings soon extended to Elena herself, and a new love story began to unfold. Elena and Alejandro's relationship flourished, culminating in a heartfelt proposal and marriage. With Alejandro's support, Elena's musical career advanced, allowing her to perform in prestigious concerts. Meanwhile, the friendship between the two families deepened, with their children, Mateo and Ava, growing closer and eagerly anticipating their frequent gatherings. Carlos and Isabella's compassionate decision to help a family in need had unexpected and joyful consequences, weaving their lives together in a tapestry of friendship, love, and shared experiences. Their story stands as a testament to the enduring power of kindness and the beautiful connections it can create. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great content. See you in the next video.